the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
Quickly to some coaching stuff, Matt Green. I ask you first, now that it's done, more intrigued, Matt Green, Jeff Lebby to Mississippi State or Mike Elko to Texas A&M? What intrigues you more in the SEC here?
Just because I don't have as much to say about it, I'll start with Jeff Lebby, because that just fits perfectly, like what we're talking about. Like Mississippi State's got, not that it's a gimmick, but they got to have a guy with a shtick, with with just his thing. That's like, we're gonna have this different looking offense that teams are gonna have to prepare for every week. Like, we're gonna sneak up on some people if they're overlooking us when they got Alabama next week on their schedule. So yeah, I think that's exactly what Mississippi State had to do from that perspective. So I love that one. And then from Texas A&M's perspective, I'm honestly laughing at Texas A&M fans. If Texas A&M fans had any sort of impact on A&M not hiring Mark Stoops, if the negative backlash was so strong that actually changed the thought process, you guys are clowns right now. Like, who the hell is Mike Elko compared to Mark Stoops? He's Mark Stoops just with less experience. Like, he's Mark Stoops like a few steps lower on the rung. Like, he's having success at a basketball school that's never had success in football before. Like, yeah, Mark Stoops does that. Like, this idea that Mark Stoops was not a big time hire, I think is like a joke. Like, A&M fan, like, who are you, Texas A&M, to think you're better than Mark Stoops? And if you weren't satisfied with the Mark Stoops hire, what does Mike Elko do for you? Like, that's not Ryan Day. That's not Kalen DeBoer. Like, that's a more boring hire than Mark Stoops, in my opinion. That's a guy you're also kind of extrapolating, like, what is his ceiling with our resources and with our recruiting footprint and all of that. Like, that's the same way you're extrapolating a guy like Stoops, that like, oh, he's winning 7, 8, 9 games at Kentucky every year. Yeah, he's winning 7, 8, 9 games at Kentucky every year. Like, you give him Texas A&M's recruiting budget, that state of Texas to recruit in, like the NIL stuff. We all know about the boosters with A&M and everything. Like, I thought Mark Stoops would have been an absolute like home run hire. It felt similar to what LSU did with Brian Kelly, that it's like, we're so good, we don't need to like have some sort of take some crazy approach to this. Let's go get a guy who's proven to be like the model of consistency, like at Notre Dame, like Brian Kelly, and with a higher ceiling at LSU, he'll just have us very solid every single year. I'm shocked to see that they had like one of the worst defenses in the country this year. So, we'll see if that pans out. But I felt like Mark Stoops was such a great hire, and now Mike Elko, it's like everything he does, it's like kind of going to be like, it feels like it's an added pressure if the fans actually had a role in Mark Stoops not getting the job.
Yeah, it's just kind of funny that it ended up with Mike Elko anyway, where he was the original target, right? Like, they did end up with the guy who was first rumored. He's been the long suspected guy. He has experience there, obviously, as the DC for 3 years, and was a great DC for Jimbo Fisher at A&M before he moved on to Duke. And look, he's been great at Duke. Duke finished undefeated at home in the ACC this year, Matt Green. Like, it's Duke. Like, this was a program in really bad shape before he took over at the end of the Cutcliffe era there, and he revitalized it. And I mean, he has a top 10 quarterback, I think, in this class committed. So I don't know what happens there for Duke, but I mean, he turned that program around. Super bright guy, went to Penn, played football there, all that kind of stuff. He's been successful wherever he's gone as a DC. And like you said, Stoops was not a flashy hire, but it was like one of those where it's like, he would have been fine. And you did flashy with Jimbo. You did flashy with these crazy recruiting classes. You just got away from flashy by bringing on Petrino and everything else. And you just need to be solid. And that's what they're ultimately going to be with Mike Elko. I don't know if Mike Elko will be good enough to win a national title, but I'm also like, there's not many people who are. Like, it's going to be, you're A&M, you've never won a national title. That's not your program. You need to be solid because you have these awesome resources. You can sign the #1 class in college football one year because you have that. Like, that's a great resource. hire just a good football coach. Hire someone that you just know is going to put a competent football program, football team on the field each and every Saturday. And that's what you're getting with Stoops, and that's what you're getting with Elko. So it could have been disastrous based on how the Stoops stuff unfolded over the last 12 to 24 hours. But ultimately, I mean, they got their guy, and I think Elko is actually a really strong hire. It just was a really weird way and a very A&M SEC way of getting to the guy, because obviously reminded a lot of folks of Schiano and Tennessee from many years ago before Pruitt was ultimately hired, where the fans revolted and the fans were like, no. But Elko's okay.
Exactly. And the Pruitt thing worked out very poorly for Tennessee. Yep. So it's like, regardless of what fans think, it's like fans want the Braves to sign Josh Donaldson to a 5-year contract after his one good year in Atlanta. And then they don't. And then it turns out that was a really good decision by the Braves to not sign that. It's like these decision makers know what they're doing. So it's like, I'm almost alarmed on both ends, because like, it's like A&M fans were pissed about it when they shouldn't have really been. But then it's like, if I'm an A&M fan and I actually had a say, I actually had like, our opinion had a sway in what the A&M administration did. It's like, well, why are you guys listening to us? Like, that's also kind of a red flag. You guys should know. I thought you guys did your research. Like, even if there was some backlash, you'd think we got the right guy, whatever. I spent a lot of the time talking about Mark Stoops, and more than Elko. I do think Elko's a good hire. To me, it's just a hilarious second guy to get, to be unsatisfied with Mark Stoops, and you just go get a guy who's almost built in the same Mark Stoops mold, who's also doing it at a basketball school. But yeah, I think ultimately with his ties to A&M, I think that's a huge part of why he's getting this job. And I think it is a good hire ultimately. But I think with how this worked out, I think there just is an added pressure. Like, Jeremy Pruitt didn't have the longest rope, like how long did he last? 3 years? And obviously there's other stuff going on off the field with recruiting and all that. But I don't know. I think it kind of it adds an extra magnifying glass like to his tenure just right off the bat. But I do think Elko is a good hire for sure.
No, I agree. And I think it's a program with a lot of talent. We'll see who he's able to keep in the boat from these past couple of classes and who exits. But I mean, he's obviously got a lot of experience in the portal. And I think the reporting was he has a lot of good relationships, high school level in Texas. There's a lot of talent there. So that'll be good. And I mean, it's going to be good football and a good battle. And I like the contrast between him and Sark coming in the SEC. Great offensive mind, elite offensive mind versus elite defensive mind for these guys. I'm very interested to see what he does at OC, though, for Mississippi State. Matt Green. Both South Carolina and Florida are officially not going bowling here. Who, in your estimation, had a more disappointing season on their way to 5-7 this year?
Ooh, that's a good question. With Florida starting 5-2, it's like the
nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.